Hey guys, in this portion of the video, in our Energy and Ecosystems Notes video, we're going to talk about the cycling of matter. Okay? Now, matter, as we've talked about before and at the beginning of the year, is anything that has mass and takes up space. Okay? Cycling means how that matter is used and reused. So here, for example, I've got a cycle of matter. I've got essentially a food chain. Now, we've talked about that food chains start with producers, but really, ultimately, all food chains are going to start with the ultimate source of energy, which is the sun, because producers get their energy from the sun. Producers get their energy to make their own food from the sun. So the ultimate source of energy is the sun. Now, a producer does begin the food chain. Okay, and producers do begin food webs. They're the starting point for food chains and food webs. But ultimately, if we said where is the beginning source of energy, that's the sun. So the sun is the beginning source of energy, and the sun gives our our producers here. Okay, in this case, we got some cattails. Okay, our plants, the energy. Okay, to make their own food and grow. And then we've got the mouse that eats the plants, okay, eats the producers. He's our primary consumer, so the energy goes from the producer to the mouse. And then we've got the fox here that eats the mouse, so the energy goes from the mouse to the producer. Remember how much energy, going back to our energy pyramid information, is passed on from one organism to the next? Only 10%. 90% of that energy is lost. So only 10% of that energy is going from that producer to that primary consumer. Only 10% of the energy is going from that primary consumer to the secondary consumer or the tertiary consumer, our top level consumer, and then only 10% of that's being passed on as well. Now, down here at the bottom, okay, we have these other guys that we talked about briefly in part 1 of this video series, and that is our decomposers. Our decomposers, our bacteria, our fungus, our worms, okay? So when this fox dies, okay, when the fox over here dies, okay, he goes belly up for whatever reasons, okay? He gets hurt and dies of old age. He dies, okay? The decomposers down here break the body, the remains of the fox down, okay? They decompose it. They break it down. They cause it to rot, decompose, and those materials go into the soil, okay? Then what's going to happen? Well, the plants using sun and soil are going to start to grow, and they're going to get nutrients, and thus the whole cycle starts all over again. Okay, and then we go back to the mouse, okay, eating the plant, the fox eating the mouse, the fox dying, and then being broken down, the remains being broken down by the decomposers, okay, and then decomposers taking the remains of the fox, returning it to the soil, and then the whole cycle starts all over again. So we have this constant cycling of matter, this substance that's being used and reused over and over again. So although some of the energy is getting lost, a lot of the energy does go back to the earth, goes back to the environment where it can be used again. All right, so here's just another example. Okay, it's another diagram of the cycling of matter. Okay, we have our producers. Remember that our producers are getting their energy from the sun. Okay, producers are eaten by consumers. Consumers are broken down by decomposers. And decomposers take that material, return it to the soil so that the producers can use that all over again. All right. Now, let's talk about a couple of other things besides the cycling of matter. Let's talk about biomass. Okay, biomass. Biomass are different types of energy sources from biotic factors. Remember, we talked about biofactors being living factors. So biomass is energy that we get from biotic factors. Okay, plants and animals. Okay, waste products. Okay, trash, coal, petroleum. Okay, all comes from plants. Okay, so these are all examples of what we can use as an energy source as human beings, as a community in our environment. Okay, we can take wood and we can burn that wood and use it for fuel. We can take crops like corn and turn it into ethanol and use it for gasoline for cars. Okay, and all sorts of things. So biomass is something that comes from living things. It's substances that come from living things and we can use as a fuel. Just add that on there to the end of our discussion with regards to cycling of matter. Okay, lastly, decay. Oops. Decay. We talked about decay. We talked about decomposers cause decay. They cause dead organisms to decay or rot. Okay, we call this the decomposition process. They break down organisms into simpler substances. Okay, so we have decomposition, decomposers, breaking down those organisms and returning them to the soil. Examples of decomposers, I've mentioned these already: bacteria, fungus, worms, okay, beetles. Okay, all of these types of organisms cause dead plant, and it doesn't have to be just animals, not just the fox, but dead plants and animals to be broken down and returned to the soil. Okay, and then last, composting. Let me get all the way through my slides here. So composting is when you can go, it's a process of cycling matter, and you can take, okay, substances at your house, okay, banana peels, okay, apple peels, grass clippings, leaves, maybe waste from the dog, okay, and you put them into a bin and you cause this matter to cycle. You add the things like our, oops, went too far. We add our things like our worms right here, and we put them into this bin, and our worms and fungus and other things cause this decay to rot, okay, this decay to happen, and these substances to rot and to break down, okay, and we make the cycling of matter happen for our own benefit, because now we can take that substance, okay, which we call humus, and we can use it to fertilize our gardens, make soil for our plants. Okay, it's kind of a human way of making the natural cycling of matter happen. Okay, and we call that composting. When we just make matter cycle on our own terms, we put the stuff together. Instead of it happening out in the woods and out in nature, we do it on our own, and we use this composting bin in order to happen. Some of you may be familiar with composting, some may not be. Okay, but it's important to remember that we get this mixture that is very nutrient rich, can be used as fertilizer, can be used for flowers, can be used for all sorts of things. Okay, and then during this whole composting process, this breaking down process, there is a type of exothermic reaction in which the compost gets hot because of all these chemical reactions that are happening within the composting bin. All right, so that ends up our energy and ecosystems notes. Obviously, if you need to go back and watch it again, please do so, and make sure you answer the question at the end of the video.